those of you that you've all sent in some things to share, Bridget's going to moderate, and we'll go through. There's things that, and then we'll also pause and look, we'll take a look at the website, the child care website as well. So we'll go ahead and go through the list, and then we'll see how we do. We can do this.
Okay, so we tried to give you all a lot of outside time. So we've got about 15 minutes to go through a pretty hefty tool. So I know everybody loves to talk about their work, so try to be a little bit brief. And then as Megan said, if your stuff is listed on the early learning website, we will save that for the end. So if I skip you, that is currently why. It's not because I may have also forgotten. But first up, we have Megan McDonald.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so we're first up, and I'm going to cover another article that we have on here too. So the first article, which has been published in Adapted Physical Activity Quarterly, is an inquiry into how parents of children with autism interact with their children in a physical activity-based play setting. So what we were looking at were differences between children with and without autism, and differences in respect to how parents interact, and ultimately what we'd like to get to is how that may or may not impact development. So I'll leave it at that. The second one, which is on page 7, was this was actually presented, I think I gave a sneak peek of this data at last year's Researchers Roundtable, and this was looking at the relationship of age, early motor skills, and observable child behaviors in young children with developmental delays, and ultimately just the role that motor skill development plays in other aspects of child development. And those findings have been published in Research and Developmental Disabilities. So if you haven't guessed, in addition to early childhood, I also spend a lot of time doing research with children with disabilities. So I would love to talk to anyone more about that. Thank you.
And next we have Alicia. So pass over, pretty please. Thank you. I didn't expect to be so soon. I'm Alicia Meow, and I am, I had the amazing experience of being a state policy postdoctoral fellow funded by the Society for Research in Child Development this past year, and learned a ton at the early learning division. And so I am working with Tom George, who is at the Oregon Department of Education now, and Shannon Lipscomb, who was my academic advisor in the fellowship, to look at, with an equity lens, look at preschool and kindergarten performance. And what we're trying to do is look at, well, see, I wrote it up here, identify schools in areas of disadvantage where children perform better than expected on the kindergarten assessment in order to explore aspects of resilience. And so a lot of this is just exploratory. So we'd hope to follow up that investigation with a little bit more of a deep dive. And then also to examine how children enrolled in OPK compare with their disadvantaged peers not in OPK on the kindergarten assessment at kindergarten entry. And then a third aim is to explore associations between the OPK assessment, TS Gold, and kindergarten assessment data across the transition to kindergarten, and potential moderators like the proportion of racial and ethnic minority children or linguistic minority children in the classroom, and a far-fetched idea of potentially looking at matched teachers in OPK and or kindergarten to see if there's a match or a mismatch, and what kind of role that plays in how children fare. And so the current work is linking up TS Gold data with the kindergarten assessment data. And we have about, I think, a 90%-ish match for a sample that we're working with. And so we're gonna proceed from there and see how it works out.
Awesome. Thank you, Alicia. Next, we have meeting basic needs in Oregon County.
Yep, over here. Kevin Hammer-Dupraw, I'm with the Department of Human Services and Oregon Health Authority. And what I've been working on is looking at basically living wage. How are people able to meet basic expenses? And so it started out as just an examination of benefit cliffs to see, okay, they've got this much in wages, okay, they might have SNAP and maybe the employment-related daycare. And so what I did, depending on the household composition, how many adults, how many kids, what are the ages of the kids, I built a model that would look at, okay, as the wage increases, basically, well, what happens to them actually in real terms? Because, you know, they might get this wage increase that actually they're not doing as well after the wage increase because they just lost some benefits. And one of the most interesting things I saw was that really childcare is the big thing. If you're a single parent and you lose your childcare subsidy, you're toast. And also, you know, not everybody is, you know, in that particular situation, but it can be very substantial. In fact, I was kind of blown away by, there was one particular one with a single parent with 3 kids living in Wilsonville. They're getting their ERDC subsidy, and they make 1 cent an hour more. And then all of a sudden, they lose $1,200 a month in childcare subsidy. And it's like, oh, okay, that's a little bit of a drop. And the thing is, you know, I had this complicated model that, you know, you don't really know what the outcome's going to be because all these interacting things are in there, and people are trying to live their lives and make decisions. And it says, oh yeah, okay, I got a 10 cent an hour raise, yay. And they have no clue that, oh, okay, I've just lost all this. So that's basically the thing. It's in a regional caseload forecast, and within that document, we typically have like a little special write-up. And so since this looks at regional outcomes, it also looks at, well, county by county, how does this look? What areas are having the most problems? So that's it, thanks.
Thank you so much, Kevin. She's right behind you.
Yeah.
All right, next we have Ashley for full day kindergarten.
Hi. So I'm Ashley Pearson. I'm a senior researcher at Education Northwest, and one of the studies that I'm working on, which in I think 2021, I'll be very excited to share with you, unfortunately not any sooner than that, is partnering with the Oregon Department of Education with certain staff there to understand the impact of the policy shift from funding half-day to full-day kindergarten, which occurred in the 2015-16 school year. So we conducted a survey in the 2018 school year to understand what practices were occurring in full-day kindergarten classrooms across the state. And then we'll be combining that with some analytic work to understand the impact of that policy shift on students from those cohorts that were in that. You want me to jump to my next one too?
That was my next thing. And she's now going to continue to the Oregon Professional Development Incentive Study.
So on the other side of the page.
Page 4.
So for this work, I am working with some former colleagues at the RAND Corporation in partnership with OCCD, with Pam and Jim and others at OCCD. And we are running actually 2 different randomized controlled trials to try to understand ways to encourage the early learning workforce to engage more in the professional development system in Oregon. So we have one where we have encouraged people who are currently in the registry but not yet involved in the Career Lattice system to hopefully engage a little bit more with the Career Lattice. And we have another one to try to encourage those already in the Lattice to increase their professional development hours and education and potentially be eligible for some different programs along those lines. So we are excited for those results. Those, again, should be out officially in 2021. Hopefully we can give some previews, though, at the next roundtable. Pam and Jim, did you want to add anything on it?
Thank you. Thank you, Ashley and colleagues. Next, we have the Partnership for Pre-K Improvement, the Research and Practice Partnership, which is with myself, Beth Green, and Katherine Pears. I'll do it unless one of you want to take it. All right. So I knew that was coming. So I'll let you look at our research questions. Here we are, of course, the partnership is with some of our lovely colleagues sitting here at the ELD, and we're working through a grant from the Gates Foundation to really understand better how to embed job and better professional learning, how to increase quality, how to increase professional development and advocacy, and a lot of basically anything in the kitchen sink, I feel like oftentimes is what we are doing as part of this work. And you may have from the sort of research side seen requests for surveys for us for the PPI survey. We will be releasing in the next couple of days a report of the class scores across OPK and Preschool Promise from last year. So if you are a hub director and you got an email from us asking if we could help you with your class observations, or if we could, if you would share the data, that is from us. We will also in the near future be contacting potentially some of you about some in-person interviews, as well as continuing to release class reports, also for hubs and grantees who did share the data with us. So thanks for your continued work. We can only know as much as you are able to share with us. Any additions? All right. Next, we have the PBS Head Start Transition Study. I'm guessing Lizzie is doing it. Okay.
Hi, everybody. I'm Lizzie Tremaine. I'm talking today about the Portland Public Schools Head Start Transition Study with Dr. Andy Mashburn as the head. We have done some quantitative surveys with Head Start teachers and kindergarten teachers in the Portland area. I'm going to focus now on the qualitative interviews and focus groups that we've been having with families who participate in Head Start, because that's where our gathering energy is right now. In spring, we highlighted 3 Head Starts in Portland based on geographic location: Kelly, Clarendon, and Sacagawea. And we held focus groups with parents getting feedback about we held the focus groups with parents whose child was about to transition into kindergarten. So we asked questions around how they felt supported in the upcoming transition from their Head Starts, how the Head Starts are able to be culturally responsive to their needs, what supports that they're getting that they really like. So highlighting what's going well is also some opportunities for feedback. And then we've recruited some interviews, parents for interviews as well, to dig into a bit more into the experience their child has in Head Start, looking forward to the transition, what they anticipate will happen. And then now, finally, that school has started, we're starting to recruit for the back end interviews after the transition. So we're going to have perspectives before, perspectives after, and hopefully get some reflection about how the system change is affecting not only the children who are transitioning, but their families as well, because Head Start has a lot of family supports. And when those go away, we're interested to see how families feel with their engagement in school and their child's successful transition into kindergarten.
Thank you, Lizzie. I'm going to skip ahead to page 7 and quickly talk about one piece of our OPRE grant, also with the Early Learning Division. So this is the professional development supports for home-based childcare providers. I'm going to talk very quickly about one piece, and then Sydney's going to talk about another piece. So we're working with 5 CCRNRs to investigate supports that help new interested regulated subsidies, so these are license exempt, non-relative providers, navigate the system. And we're thankful also for some of our colleagues over there at DHS and helping us with this work as well. These supports include a suite of materials developed by OSU and ELD, as well as a fee waiver for first aid CPR compared to a control group, basically. So we aim to collect data for about a year. We currently have about 45 early educators in our system, and we will be finished data collection and have initial analyses in this spring, and we'll be fully finished with the 1-year follow-up in next spring. And we're looking basically for differences in success in navigating the new requirements, the new system for these types of providers, as well as potentially more longevity in care and some other outcomes. Sydney?
And the second piece of the study is looking at Focused Childcare Network model and how that supports home-based providers in both efficacy and also in developmentally appropriate quality practices in their facilities. We'll measure that by a variety of different things, but also an in-facility observation. We have this in 2 waves. So wave 1 is starting now in October. We've done our first training. There will be another wave in October of next year. And we currently have 4 QIS network leads running 5 networks participating, but we are interested in finding some more for controls in this year and also for intervention and control in wave 2. So if there are Focused Childcare Network folks interested, then let us know. And I think that's, we'll be just looking at those teacher practices, attitudes, and beliefs, and we'll also be comparing that to some business as usual groups, looking at some data from Oro and reaching out to providers at random from that system.
Thank you, Sydney. Okay, sorry, I'm also going to do number 8 because Shannon Lipscomb cannot be here and she asked me to do it. I'm on the team for Roots of Resilience. You all have, most of you in this room know Shannon and have heard her speak about this wonderful professional development program. I did, while people were at lunch, put a copy of a research brief from the first publication that we wrote on Roots. It's our first implementation, first 2 years of implementation. And then also Shannon is on this lovely thing called sabbatical this year. And one of her big goals for sabbatical is to disseminate this wonderful work that she has been leading for really the past 4.5 years now around Roots of Resilience. So you will see some professional development offerings. I also have more of both of these if somebody at your table already took yours, and happy to share them electronically as well. So come see me if you would like more of those. We will have some underpowered experimental trial results soon. So yeah, thank you for letting me speak. And now I'm going to turn it to Megan to talk about the other OPRE and the website.
Thank you. Wow, we've done this.
Thank you for following directions. Excellent work.
It's working. Yeah, this is like speed research, and I appreciate it. So connected to the study that Bridget first explained about the navigators and the focused family childcare networks, we also have an administrative aspect of this impact grant. And it's looking at who the program is reaching, looking at the administrative data in terms of the children, the families, and the providers, and thinking about after the 2014 reauthorization, which led to a lot of things, a lot of changes in the rules for families as well as for providers. What impact has that had? So looking before, which is I think at the last roundtable during the sharing tool, we shared our pre-reauthorization results, and one of the most notable ones and one we're very curious about is that as of 2016-ish, it's federal fiscal year, so it's always a little wonky to think about, but that families on average were on subsidy for 4 months. So if you imagine you're a family and you get subsidy for your child and you're there for 4 months and then go off, what does that mean? And so one of the rules that has shifted is a 12-month authorization period. And so we're very curious how that is playing out. We know it sounds very like, oh, well, we'll just change it. But you all know that things don't quite work that simply. And so we're very curious to see what has happened. And also looking at the providers, which is something new, of how the providers that are engaging in this system, how have they changed? How is this changing how they're serving children? So that will be forthcoming. We'll be working on analyses for that very soon. But of course, never fast enough for the pace that policy works. And then I'm going to take just a couple minutes to go through. You'll notice we skipped some things in here because they come out of the research partnership and the work that's done at Oregon State. And I thought Michaela and I thought the best way to do this would be to actually look at the website. In all of your folders, you should have got a little postcard, and it has the links to our different sites. So you'll see a little postcard. So if you go to this main Early Learners site, you'll see we've made some changes if you visited it before in the past to now. So these headings have adjusted a little bit. Anyone who submitted research and in addition to wanting to share today also said you want it on the website, this is where it will end up living, is in this research tab. I would like to give Pam a chance because she works with us closely on the workforce. We have in your folders, you also see our new one-pager for the workforce. The 2018 workforce report is out today. We can consider today a release date, perhaps, to give it a.
Is that what I was supposed to do?
Yeah. And we're very excited. We won't go into it today, but we also have, in addition to here, we have county level information. And we've now done some workforce by county as well. Did he get them up? He did. Alan got them up. So if you go to the county, you can also see, this is Benton County.
Yay, Benton County, woo!
Thank you. And Alexis Merculia, who's our lovely graduate student, gets a lot of credit for the lovely design. She had no idea she was a graphic designer until she started working with us. Okay. And so we do the workforce, and and Pam in the OCCD team is integral, clearly, they have the registry. And so I would like to give Pam a couple of minutes to
sing a song.
To sing a song, share what you'd like.
Dance, to woohoo. Yeah, well, thanks, Megan. We love collaborating with OSU and the whole research group partnership on this workforce report that happens every year. This is our 7th year of being able to report this data. And just a reminder, there's a little foreshadowing this morning because Beth kind of introduced the workforce report. But just a reminder that ORO, Oregon Registry Online, the database, was actually built with the research questions in mind. So the research partnership came together and they said, hey, there are policy questions we can't answer about the workforce. And so we had those questions in the forefront as ORO was being built. Remember that, Jim? We survived that, and 7 years later, with some solid data, this is what you see. I love the visual; it's very fun. I was a little sad that first, in the middle is the turnover rate, but no worries. The good news about so even though between 2017 and 2018 we had 24% turnover rate, the good news is that the stayers are more likely to have been involved in professional development initiatives. So that feels good, right? Which all the way in our conversations this morning and everything, I kept thinking, we have to keep focusing on the retention. We got to keep people in. So the other thing that I think is interesting is the demographics. We talked about that this morning a little bit too, which is really interesting, and the gap between the percentage of children and the percentage of the workforce. But if you look at in this report, the workforce report, our percentage of general population, when you compare that to the percentage of the workforce, our workforce is a higher percentage of people who represent diversity and other languages. So I think that's really interesting, and probably we could get into the data a little bit more. But I think it's a little bit of a generational thing in my mind, maybe getting those high school students into the workforce, but I think we have to figure out how to retain the folks we have. Let's see, what else is interesting? We, of course, at the registry, hopping up to 42%, we were really hoping to go over the 50% mark of folks that are engaged, meaning they have step on the Oregon registry, or they've received a scholarship or an education award. That's at 52%. But you know, everybody's in the Oregon registry, so we actually have 24,000 in 2018. That was part of the Oregon registry. Let's see. Reminder too, we talked about that this morning, that the workforce report is the workforce working in regulated license programs and the designated positions. And there's a chocolate kiss for somebody that can name the designated positions. Not Michaela. Ronnie can. There's a kiss for you. So directors, head teachers, teachers. What I think is interesting also, you know, okay, I won't go too much longer, Megan, because of course I could talk about this all day. It's my passion. But 42%, the designated positions include all the positions who work directly with children. So directors, head teachers, teachers, assistants, aides, all of that gets into the designated positions. And that's 42% of those folks have engaged in one or more of the professional development initiatives. However, if you take the assistants and the aides out of that mix, the percentage goes up pretty significantly. So you'll want to get on there and find out what that percentage is. All right, I'm done.
Thank you, Pam. And if there are questions, so like Pam said, this is developed to answer questions that are of policy relevance. And that doesn't just mean for the whole state. That means for your regions and your communities. So if you have questions, and we put it on everything, if you have questions, contact us. Because if we don't know what the questions are, then we'll make stuff up. No. We'll make up our own questions. And that's not a good way to go. Please tell us what the questions are. So we are definitely over time, but I'm going to go really quick and show just a couple more things, and they're described in more detail in your packets. But we also we do structural indicators of quality. This is not the like, how nice is the building, which I had to think about for a minute. This is things like this is the facility level and like education level, those things we know that are associated with quality, training, those kind of things. And it's a little bit different from the workforce because it's at a facility level. And then this happens every 2 years. So the next one will be 2020. This is every year? So I still get confused. This is every year. It's not, okay. Yes, because it's merged with the workforce report. So this one's kind of confusing. So let us know if you have questions, and I'll get you to Michaela to help answer them. And then we have the child care supply, which is every 2 years. And recently a report on the child care deserts that continues to get a lot of attention and hopefully is helping us come up with solutions. And I'm hearing about solutions, and please, if you have community things that are happening and within your regions that are solutions and they're working, let me know, because when reporters call and want to talk about the problem, I really want to be able to say, but I hear that this is happening, and I hear that these other things are happening. So that's my plug for that one. And then we have profiles. These we also have at the state level, and they provide kind of a basic overview, and we also have them for every county. So they have real basics, and we have them at the county level as well. So that is all I'm going to share. There's more up here, and ultimately, if you have questions or there's things that you're curious about that relate to this world, please don't hesitate to reach out. Okay. Thank you. And if there's feedback on the site.
And I just want to make a plug for the research section that this is only as good as those of you who submit your research to our site. Down at the bottom, there's a link to the submission form. And so if you would like we want to be as inclusive and cover the topics as much as possible. So if you know of research, even if it's not your own, that you think should be on here, please send it to someone, send it to us so we can contact them, because we're in the process of building the research section here. So there is a lot of things missing, but we're depending on all of you to help us fill that out.
Okay, I think we did it. We're ready to transition. Thank you, Bridget, for facilitating. I really appreciate it. And thank you, everyone, for your work. Okay, we're now going to switch gears to afternoon session. We're 13 minutes behind, not bad. I can deal with it. We'll have to do some transitioning before, but I know that a few people have come in, weren't here earlier, and so I think if there's anyone that has come in since we did introductions and has not otherwise introduced yourself, can we go around and do some quick introductions of newbies? You have to go. Yeah, well.
Is this me starting? You'll get more of me in like 1 minute. So Sara Mickelson at Early Learning Division.
David Mandel, also at the Early Learning Division.
You will also get more of me in a couple minutes, but Katherine Pears, I'm from the Oregon Social Learning Center.
I'm Jamie Peters. I'm a pediatrician at OHSU and work with some of the Already network around school readiness.
I'll just introduce myself now and in a minute. I'm Stiefvater from the Oregon Health Authority.
Hi, I'm Tiffany Chapman. I'm a regional organizer with Family Forward.
Robin Hill Dunbar from the Ford Family Foundation.
Okay, now we all need to introduce ourselves back to, no. We're gonna be here a while. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and do a quick transition. If you need a water break, coffee break, now's a good time. And bring our afternoon panel up. So if you're on the afternoon panel, come on up this way. And you can choose if you want to sit here or here and be able to see the screen.
I'm going to stand up.
Do I move the slides or does someone move the slides? Okay.
gonna smile a lot.
Okay. That's okay. You can watch when we're writing out, and I'll figure out what the timing is because. Just like clarifying questions. Yeah. Thank you. I forgot we had to go. Don't put a gong near me if you don't want me to ring. Wow, I need to get a gong and carry it around with me. All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. As I just told you, my name is Sara Mickelson. I'm the Chief of Staff at the Early Learning Division, so I manage our policy work as well as our research work and legislative stuff and lots of different things. So I'm excited to be here with a great panel that kind of spans across the childcare world from I'm biased towards, maybe some of the infant toddler stuff over there, my colleagues, but from birth to the transition to kindergarten into after school. So I know that the presentations we're about to see have some great information and research. I'm excited to be here in a different context than last year because I think what you see in the childcare timeline, that's a great timeline, by the way. Kudos for that. We get a giant blown up one to him. Yeah. I'm sure we can. Hopefully this next year we'll add another exciting bullet. But as you see, the last thing on the timeline is the passage of the Student Success Act. So it's exciting to be here on the heels of literally doubling the budget of the Early Learning Division. So that's very exciting. Not quite doubling the staff at the Early Learning Division, but we shall manage. And we're very excited. A theme I think we'll see today in our presentation, and then I'll let you all do your thing because it's far more interesting than this, is really about access and equity. I think what's exciting about the Student Success Act is that it is I think, in both the early learning space, so we'll serve 15,000 children, additional children in either new or enhanced sort of slots across various types of programs, which is great. That means 15,000 children birth to 5 in Oregon who didn't receive services or didn't quite receive services that met their needs will now receive those services, whether it's preschool, whether it's parenting education, whether it's through Oregon for kindergarten / Head Start. There's a ton of exciting things happening. And early Head Start, 1,400 new early Head Start slots, infants and toddlers. It's just exciting all around, but I think what we know is one that didn't maybe touch childcare as much as, well, really at all, but I think our mixed delivery preschool impacts the supply of childcare, so that in that regard it's exciting, but we know it still doesn't reach, it's not, I know I'm already down on this, but I'm trying to prepare us for the next session, so we're excited, but we know that there's a lot of work left to do, and I think that's sort of evident across all of these presentations is that there is a lot of work to do, but there's a promising way to do it, and we have a lot of information from all the great work that you all do to ensure that the system that we do build and that we get the chance to really build with this funding is responsive to the needs of the families and children that we want to serve, and that we can, I think, steer differently from what you heard this morning in ensuring that our workforce, that we're supporting our professionals, especially those that actually represent the children and families they serve, and building more capacity in culturally specific programs, and building more equity and access across in general. And I think all of these presentations will echo that theme of interventions, for lack of a better word, that really work for that population, and that will, I think, most things here will be affected by the Student Success Act and all the new we have. So glad to be up here and excited to witness these presentations. So I'm going to turn it over to the panelists to introduce themselves. They did not sit in order because they're trying to throw us all off up here, but we're going to start with a presentation on the need for infant toddler childcare.
We introduced ourselves briefly, but I'm Anna Stiefvater. I'm a public health nurse. I work in maternal and child health at the Oregon Health Authority. I wasn't here this morning, so is it like we sit down, or do you want me to stand up? Okay. Should I say sitting, or like put on a show? Okay, wherever I'm comfortable. I guess I will stay here. So thank you for the invitation to present this project. I haven't been to this meeting before, so I'm glad to be here. Tiffany Chapman is presenting with me. As she introduced herself, she's from Family Forward Oregon. Tiffany has been a partner with us in this project that I want to share with you.
Yeah. So I just want to make one clarification. For the purposes of this project, I was actually a storyteller from the perspective of a parent, a teacher, and an administrator in an early childhood education center. So this wasn't associated with my current role at Family Forward Oregon. Rather, I was one of the storytellers for this project.
Am I not doing that? I can just talk for a second. What I wanted to say is this project started with we called it, or it was called a COIN, which is just a collaborative, innovative and improvement network. So we were working with other states around the social determinants of health for moms and babies. And our project team sort of decided to frame our focus around infant child care as a social determinant of health. I don't think we have to explain why we think it's a social determinant of health to this group, but we know that it's crucial for sort of the health of moms and babies to get off to a good start, and infant child care is an important piece of that. Our group really wanted to sort of form our project under these principles of equity that we didn't make up, but we found and liked. So the idea that we would use data to sort of understand as much as we can, and then lead with the voices of those who are impacted, both in defining the problem and designing the solutions. And so you'll see that we chose to do a storytelling project, and I think we were trying to get at both of these things. We were trying to have people that were impacted by child care policies and programs talk about their experience, and we really wanted to welcome that same group into conversations about what we think the solutions are. And we tried to use an equity lens as we went about this project. There were many partners involved, and we had a number of community partners or people that are impacted by the policies at the table with us for all of these discussions. I would say along the way, I think many of us know this, that pretty much anyone you talk to is impacted by childcare or has been impacted by childcare. So some people came forward to tell their stories, and that was their role, but I think we found that most people have stories. So this is what we did. We contracted with an organization called Story Center, and they helped us to facilitate a 3-day storytelling workshop. We recruited 6 women to participate. Tiffany was one of them. And, we made an effort to try to get some geographic diversity, some diversity of experiences, sort of based on our budget. And because it was the first time we'd done it, we could only take 6 people. So it's 6 people's stories. In the 3-day workshop, they worked on developing their stories, finding visuals to go with their stories, learning how to use the video software, and made their stories in the 3-day workshop. So it was a fun thing to be a part of. I was there as a helper. Tiffany obviously can share more about the experience of doing that. And then I guess the reason we chose a storytelling project is because we think stories matter. So we think, this is just sort of a few ideas of why we think stories matter, that they help connect people to issues on a more personal level, helps people to understand complex problems, helps to build empathy and sort of spur people to action. We think there was a component of this that was sort of a grieving and healing process for some of the storytellers, and doing this in a group setting and really sort of supporting each other through that process really built community. And sort of, I would say that all of the storytellers, some of them came in wanting to sort of be advocates for improved policies and programs, and I think everybody left sort of wanting to work together to make things better. Okay, so here it is, the stories. I love it that I think someone else is in charge of the technology, because this is the hardest part. We'd like to share two of the stories. We have a story from Tiffany, who's here with us, and a story from Juana that we'd like to show. I don't think it matters, either's fine.
Mi pareja y yo esperamos 5 años para tener hijos porque teníamos metas personales que queríamos lograr. Cuando nació nuestro primer hijo, Axel, lo quería cerca de mí, pero tenía que trabajar. En nuestra comunidad damos a cuidar a los hijos con personas que conocemos, un miembro de la familia, un vecino. Nunca nos preguntamos qué tipo de atención ellos dan o proveen. Tuvimos dificultad para dar a cuidar a Axel porque lloraba mucho. Nosotros no entendíamos lo que estaba pasando. Pensábamos que Axel lloraba mucho porque se parecía al papá, que también lloraba mucho cuando era bebé. Nosotros decidimos cambiar el horario de trabajo para cuidar a nuestro hijo y nuestra siguiente hija. Cuando estaba embarazada con mi tercera hija, decidí dejar de trabajar. Quería verla crecer, ver su desarrollo y sentir sus emociones. Comenté con mi pareja, no sé cómo vamos a poner comida en nuestra mesa. No me importa. Yo quiero verla crecer. Con solo un ingreso, batallamos para sobrevivir. Pero entonces tuve la oportunidad de cuidar a los hijos de una amiga y eso me dio una puerta abierta a la educación temprana. Ahora estoy como proveedora de cuidado infantil y veo qué tan importantes son los entrenamientos y la formación para poder dar un servicio de calidad a las familias con las que trabajo. Si hubiera tenido el conocimiento y entrenamiento cuando Axel era un bebé, podría haber apoyado más sus habilidades, su desarrollo y su aprendizaje. Los niños son cimientos de nuestra sociedad. Si los sistemas para el cuidado y enseñanza no es apoyado adecuadamente, ¿qué estamos diciendo sobre el valor de los niños como seres humanos?
I realized I wanted to work with children when I was 5 and had my first baby, my little sister. I would hold her and walk in circles singing to her. That was my heaven. I became a parent myself in 2010. The nurse handed my daughter to me and told me that I didn't seem like a first-time mother. The fact was that I wasn't. I had been taking care of other people's babies as an early childhood educator since 1999. Now I brought my daughter to the center where I worked as an infant teacher and director. One day when she was 10 months old, I was carrying an infant to change his diaper, and my daughter pulled up on my pant leg. I looked at her, then to the schedule on the wall, then to the 6 other infants in the room who all needed feeding or naps or changing. I said, "I'm sorry, baby, I love you," and continued walking. She let go of my pants and hit her head on the linoleum. I wanted to burst into tears, but I didn't. I handed the boy who needed changing to another teacher and hugged my daughter. I invested in other people's children for 13 years, and my own daughter and I haven't benefited. Lots of people my age are buying their first house. Last year, my daughter and I moved 3 times and almost became homeless. She goes from 0 to 60 in 1 second, and she has every right to be angry. Teachers shouldn't have to choose between the profession they love and providing for their families. Parents shouldn't be struggling to pay for childcare, and business owners shouldn't feel so stretched in their budgets. The system is broken. Now, I advocate for investments in early childhood education because the first year lays the foundation for the rest of a baby's life, and because my own family's foundation has never been secure.
So I think you'll get a taste of how powerful the stories are. I really give Tiffany credit for being here and having her story shared and then talking about it. Just at a very high level, let's try and go to the next slide, but you know, each one of these stories I think tells, have a lot of themes, but I just tried to categorize on this next slide just a list of what we would say were themes from the 6 stories. And I just said lack of care choices, especially for children with special needs, the expensive care, concerns about the quality or lack of quality of care, the stress, pressure, anxiety, and depression that families face, pregnancy discrimination, this idea of choice between paying bills and careers and good care, that the difficulties are nearly universal. It kind of doesn't matter who you are. People are struggling with this, that there's not enough systems in place to support families, and poor pay and lack of stability for teachers or providers. So we did choose both of the stories that you saw are women that have worked or are working as childcare providers, and we wanted to share those based on the focus around the workforce. And then I'm just going to turn it to Tiffany. Like I said, we wanted to engage the storytellers in helping us think about what the solutions are in addition to describing their experiences around infant child care. And so I just asked Tiffany to share a little bit about her ideas for what would have made this better for you and what would have helped the situation you were in that we saw a little bit about in the story. Do you want me to read along? Okay. Well, we chose these videos because it was kind of an interesting juxtaposition of Juana entering the field to spend more time with her family, right? And then me leaving the field essentially for the same reasons, and being a single income parent, it was not tenable for me to stay in the field. So we actually asked Juana what would help her, and she said to offer providers more incentives like scholarships and mentorships, assuming for training purposes, and then lower co-payments for families, and she's talking about ERDC co-payments. So as a provider now, that's what would help her. What would have helped me stay in the field after 13 years is definitely higher pay. It is a field that is highly demanding. You are constantly being physically, emotionally, and mentally worked. You're required, and you should be required to be constantly trained and training
doing trainings, which is not always covered by your employer, and you're already on a stretched income and you're being expected to pay for that. So for me, better pay comparable to K through 12 teachers, and then maybe an incentive to open my own in-home daycare in terms of down payment assistance on a house or an individual development savings account that I could have paid into over the course of several years to start a business. Just financial incentives up front, but also state investment, because you do have a limit to supply and demand with state ratios, which we know is good for the children, but it's a bad business model. As a business owner right now of a kids yoga business, it has much lower overhead. I did the math for opening a center when I was pregnant in 2009, and 60 to 65% of my budget was going to staff. So I decided against doing that. So there is ongoing costs associated with running that kind of business. So those are just some initial thoughts of what would have helped me personally. And I do want to give a little shout out. I have left the field, but I am still committed to improving it through advocacy. And if anybody wants to talk to me afterwards, I would love to see how we could work together. One of our, I feel like people in this room, our goals could be to educate legislators, right? Because we take for granted all the things we know about brain development, that the first 3 years lay the foundation of an infant's brain for their life. I'm not going to say who, but there was a legislator during our House vote of House Bill 2005, which is our paid family medical leave bill that passed, yay, this last session, literally said, why are we investing more in childcare when they were talking about before 3 years old, when literally everything that happens before then gets quote unquote washed away. So this is the kind of education that we're needing to do, because that's problematic that we have policymakers who are saying that. So if you want to talk to me about maybe writing a letter to the editor or some other way to get involved, I'd love to talk to you afterwards. Thank you guys for being here.
I just was going to show there's a picture of all the storytellers, and there's a picture of our project team. I wanted to acknowledge that John is a part of our project team, and I will then pass it on. But I was hoping you could see the pictures of all the storytellers, and there are 4 more stories that we're working on getting available. Those are the storytellers on our website, so that you'll have access to those.
Well, thank you. And thank you guys for this opportunity to really share all of the exciting work that's happening at the division in regards to Baby Promise. Before I begin, I'd like to take this opportunity to again thank all of the storytellers that are here today. We've heard throughout the day a lot of really interesting stories that are really vital to the work that we do. They help us to understand where the gaps and needs still are in our system. And I think it's helpful, and they work as a mechanism to really ground us in the why we all do this work every single day. So again, thank you all for sharing your stories and for reminding us of the importance of this work. So some of you may know me. My name's Bleakney-Huebsch. I'm here in a new role, along with my colleague John Reeves at the Early Learning Division. I'm one of 2, along with John, infant and toddler specialist at the division. And I'm here because I spearhead Baby Promise. There we go. So to begin, I just wanted to give you guys a quick overview of the framework for Baby Promise. We've got just a little bit of time with you today to give you an update, but I'll fill in what I can, and John will jump in when I try to speed through this and gloss over something. But we only have 5 minutes allocated to us, and that's 3 minutes more than I'd prefer, so. So for starters, the framework for Baby Promise, we are going to have infant and toddler specialists in 3 regions throughout the state where we're doing our pilot of Baby Promise. These infant toddler specialists are going to be leading focused childcare network, so supporting the providers that are in Baby Promise as they build their knowledge and skills. They'll do on-site coaching and consultation and really just support them one-on-one with their continuous quality improvement journeys. Additionally, starting just next week, we have 0 to 3 coming in for the critical competency infant toddler caregivers training. And so this is a series of 5 trainings that are 2 days that are infant toddler specialists, not only in the Baby Promise regions, but the infant toddler specialists throughout the state in Oregon will be attending. This will ultimately be able to trickle down and provide 45 hours of training that will be able to be disseminated to the field. So that's an opportunity to get a really strong foundation for those infant toddler specialists and then ultimately impact the practices throughout the state. Next up, when it comes to Baby Promise, we have a really interesting feature that was kind of touched upon in some of the conversations earlier today, but it's utilizing the contracted slots model. So this is a really exciting opportunity, and for some of you who've been around in the field and have seen the research of Bobby Weber in the past, utilizing contracted slots is really unique. We're able to set expectations for programs when it comes to the quality practices that we'd like to see them demonstrate, hold them accountable for that, and then ultimately compensate them at a pace that, you know, then enables them to actually ultimately succeed in doing that. So it's an interesting model that we're incorporating in with Baby Promise. So we'll be working with our providers to, again, identify the cost per child, setting those thresholds of expectations that we want, and hopefully ultimately retaining them and the children that are in those contracted slots. And then another piece when it comes to the environmental enhancements, we have money set aside to enable programs, whoops, sorry guys, to enable those programs to, you know, purchase if they need an evacuation crib, if they need materials or equipment in their program so that they can demonstrate and ultimately provide those high quality environments that we're looking for. Anything to add?
Tiny bit. So folks in the room, John Reeves, also working closely with Dana and all things related to infants and toddlers around the state. So it's a great place to be and a great time in our state. So I just want to mention around the infant toddler specialists, those folks are embedded in our in those 3 regions in our child resource and referral programs. And what we were thinking around that 0 to 3 critical competencies training was really ensuring that we had the right level of professional support for those specialists, because we know that infant toddler professionals are sort of the last crew to start getting up to, you know, speed on getting their education levels up. And you know, we started, I think, in our system kind of moving down with preschool programs and saying, okay, we need people with bachelor's degrees, and you know, now we're getting to the place where we're like, we need the same thing for our toddler professionals too. So we knew that we were going to have to develop some of our capacity in the local communities, and so 0 to 3 has a very robust curriculum that we can wrap around that. And then on the heels of that, we've been able to work with all of the CCR&Rs to bring in infant toddler specialist positions at the same time, so they're all getting that same training, and we're starting to build that foundation so when, you know, Baby Promise happens to roll out statewide, we're ready. So just wanted to mention that.
Okay, so where Baby Promise is at. Since I'm looking at John's screen, I need him to move along with me too. When it comes to Baby Promise, again, right now we're just a pilot, hopefully one day moving statewide, but we're in the central Oregon region, so Deschutes, Crook, Jefferson, up in Multnomah, and then down on the southwestern coast in Kusinkurry. And so those are the 3 regions that we're beginning with. We've got grants established with the child care resource and referral offices in those regions. So they're the folks that are going to be hiring the infant toddler specialists, the program staff to support Baby Promise. And then those will also be the individuals who are ultimately contracting with infant toddler programs that will be providing those services. When it comes to Baby Promise, we're hoping to serve between 200 and 250 children. Those again are going to be children 6 weeks to 3 years of age from working families at 185th percent of the federal poverty line or below. And then ultimately we want to impact 40 providers with this pilot. So when it comes to those programs, they're going to be a mixed setting, both family-based programs, centers, they could be teen parent programs, early head starts, relief nurseries, so on and so forth. But that's what we're ultimately seeking to do. When it comes to this work, kind of where we're at right now, for the most part, the staff in the 3 regions have been hired, so that's really an exciting accomplishment. We just had actually 2 informational sessions this week, one up in Multnomah, one out in Central Oregon, that were really well attended, so they're starting to recruit providers. From that process, those providers will submit a letter of interest. They'll continue, kind of going through the vetting process, determining kind of the cost per child, if this is a good fit for the program, for that region, if they're providing the services that they're seeking for their community. And then the last kind of piece that we're working out with our friends from DHS over there, hi Regina, we're still trying to figure out, when it comes to kind of the development of our systems, how we're going to communicate with ERDC about baby promise families. So the federal funding that we're getting, the CCDF funds, are for baby promise, and they're also those same funds that are being used for ERDC. And as Megan was alluding to earlier, that 12-month protected eligibility means we really need to be able to identify who these children and families are and be able to communicate between our 2 systems so we don't inadvertently redetermine the eligibility during that time. So after that, then we'll be ready to really launch and have Baby Promise up and running. So that's exciting. And our last slide. You guys can all look at these, but they're really our performance targets, the things that we're ultimately seeking to have as outcomes. John already alluded to the fact that one day we'd like to be statewide. Additionally, we want to, influence positively the number of infant and toddler slots that exist, but not only just the number and capacity of those, but also the quality that we were speaking to earlier. And then ultimately increase the continuity of care for infants and toddlers. We know that these are essential years for these young children. Having continuity of care, having responsive, consistent caregivers is really vital to their healthy development. So we want to address that by doing these contracted slots, but also making sure that we're able to retain the staff that we have in these programs, because if that's kind of a revolving door, then those children don't have that experience. Is there anything you'd like to add?
No, because our time's up.
Okay, well, thank you all so much. We're here if you have any questions or any comments that you'd like to make.
They saw the look and they're not going to ask any questions. I think while we're waiting, I'll just add that we did pass House Bill 2024, which codifies Baby Promise into state statute. So it is a program. It will be statewide. The next, Katherine Pears.
Hi, I'm Katherine Pears. I'm going to talk to you today about, I'm actually going to stand up because I tend to talk with my hands and I don't want to knock anybody out. So I want to talk to you today about the transition between what these fabulous folks are talking about in terms of Baby Promise and 0 to 5 care, and we'll be talking about after school. So the transition between early childhood education and K through 12. And people often refer to these 2 sort of different eras in a child's life as silos, and the idea that really there's quite a divide when we talk about what happens between the early childhood years and K through 12. Partially because, there are a lot of differences in what kids need to know or what they're expected to know as they come out of early childhood. And this is assuming that they have early childhood care. But it's early childhood tends to be sort of more activity-based. There's sort of fewer, very, very explicit rules and a lot less structure. And that's absolutely developmentally appropriate to the learning that happens during those years. But then when we look to see what happens when they make that sort of change over to the K through 12 system, they're going to a much more lesson-based, much more structured, much more rule-bound kind of environment. And we find that a lot of kids trip up. And I didn't think it would really be good to have a little kid falling into the ravine. But we do, in fact, have kids who have really difficult transitions. And in particular, the way the difficulty is distributed is inequitable. We know that kids who have had kind of rough starts that come from under-resourced environments, we know that kids who have disabilities, we know kids who've been in the foster system are the least likely to have the kinds of early childhood, quality early childhood experiences we're all wishing for them and talking about here today. And that they then disproportionately end up being suspended, being expelled, not finishing school, not getting the grades and the education that they need. Research, though, has shown that there are a couple of things that can really help kids as they make that transition. And that's being well grounded in some early academic skills and some social emotional skills. And that together, these two sorts of skills can really form that bridge so that kids who are well grounded in those abilities as they move across that transition do much better than kids who don't have those skills to start kindergarten. And we know from a lot of research that kids who, to sort of follow up on this idea that kids forget their early childhood, which is silly. We know too that kindergarten, how things happen in kindergarten for kids have huge impacts on what's going to happen to them as adults. There's been decades now of research that look at kids before they enter school, see what they look like in terms of preparedness, and then link that to what they do as adults in terms of income, in terms of occupation, in terms of drug use and crime as well. You'll notice, though, on my little drawing here, that I put social and emotional skills at the bottom of the bridge. And that's not a mistake, and that's not thinking, oh, academic skills are better. In fact, what we're finding from a lot of research is that socio-emotional skills really are that underpinning for academic skills. That those skills, and when I'm talking about social emotional skills, I'm talking about things like basic abilities to sit still and pay attention, to have inhibitory control, which means that if I really, really, really want to give the teacher an answer, I'm not leaping up and down, I'm still remembering to sit in my chair and raise my hand. Or that if my friend knocks my favorite crayon box off the table, I'm not going to whack my friend on the head, even though I might feel like it. That kids can handle disappointment without disrupting an entire class, and that kids have pro-social skills so that they know how to cooperate, they know how to share, they know how to get along. We also know, though, that of these skills, these are the hardest to teach, the ones that are most often missed in terms of kids coming into school. They're most often unprepared in terms of these skills, and that educators on both sides of the ravine say that these are the most difficult to teach, and that they don't necessarily have the training early on to be able to provide children with these skills. They know, they know how to do letter sounds, they know how to do numbers. How do you teach somebody to share? It's a bigger problem. So we at the Oregon Social Learning Center, we're really sort of pondering this problem of how could we help all kids, so kids who are coming from under-resourced backgrounds, kids who are traditionally not being as prepared as other kids, really be able to be successful in crossing that great big divide between early childhood education and K through 12. And we have this little intervention that we call the Kids in Transition to School, or KITS program. And I've talked about it here before. I've been privileged to actually be able to hold forth on it when we were doing the early research into it. So I'm going to describe it really briefly here. And of course, I forgot my handout that gives you more detail. But at the end, I'm going to give it to Megan, so she'll be able to post it. And at the end, there's also our website, which will give you detail if you want the nitty-gritties of the program. But in general, the idea behind the program is that this program happens in that transition period between what would normally be early childhood education and K through 12. It happens whether kids have been in early childhood ed and have this summer before school without a lot of services, or it happens if kids have never been in early childhood education. It happens during those 8 weeks of summer before school starts, and typically into the first 4 weeks of school to kind of really bookend that transition. It is designed to prepare kids academically and socially for kindergarten, but with a huge emphasis on those social emotional skills. So really working to be able to have kids be able to understand what it is to share, what it is to cooperate, what it is to sit still in a classroom, you know, if they've never actually really had to sit at a desk doing work. How do you sit in a chair? How do you actually pay attention to the teacher and raise your hand? And we not only work with the kids, but it's a 2-generational program. So we also bring parents in to have parent groups where we talk to them not only about what you can do, what they can do in the moment to prepare their kids for school, but also just about basic sort of parenting skills. Because if you're going to have a crisis or if you're going to have difficulties with behavior, one of the biggest times that that's going to happen is during a great big transition, right? So really being able to talk to parents about using positive parenting skills to support that transition and anything else that's going to happen in the child's life, any other new skill that they need to learn, is also part of the program. And we actually provide training for the teachers. And I hadn't really thought about this very much until I started thinking about, okay, well, how do I fit into a conversation about workforce? But if you think about it, you know, I'm talking to you about a program. I'm talking to you about a program. We have a curriculum. You know, we have a way of teaching kids. And lots of those curricula out there are curricula. So you take them off a shelf, you go off, and the teachers are expected to do it all by themselves. So if it's a social emotional curriculum, that's great, right? But they still don't know how to teach the social emotional skills. They still don't have the background training. So what we do in KITS is really to understand that in order to teach a curriculum, in order to have the same sorts of results that we got in a laboratory and we believe we can get anywhere, we actually have to provide the training. And in this particular case, it's proven to be really, I think, important because, as I said, what we found as we started training providers is that they don't get this training elsewhere. So what we do is that we have a comprehensive training that we provide not only in our curriculum, but also in instructional practices, specifically in teaching kids social emotional skills, because it isn't the same as teaching letter sounds. It really involves being able to get in, demonstrate a skill to a teacher, to a child, have that child also demonstrate that skill, know when to scaffold that skill, know when to be able to reinforce that child, know when to be able to make a suggestion about something else that might help or something else that can be done. And we work also in terms of evidence-based classroom management techniques. So again, how do you positively reinforce children? How do you set out the steps of what it means to share instead of just saying share? Because that's kind of a, you know, it's a broad concept. What are the steps? How do you teach them? And we also offer not just the training sessions, but also coaching throughout the first implementations of the program. So every week, teachers are meeting with their coach and they're having feedback based on, oh, look at that, how my animation got silly. The feedback is based on observing the practices. So the coaches are watching a tape of the teachers implementing the program with the kids in practice. And then they're having feedback. They're talking about, okay, well, you know, I see you did this. What were you, you know, how did that work? What else could work? With the principle that it's always positive. We are not coming in to tear people down, but we're coming in really to support people in being able to support the children to learn these skills. The other important thing is that we're using the same techniques, or having teachers use the same evidence-based management techniques that we're teaching the parents. So as we're teaching the teachers about how to scaffold sharing or problem solving for the kids in the classroom, we're talking to the parents about the same thing. Because again, they're all dealing with the children. They're all teaching the children. Parents are teaching the children, teachers are teaching the children. Being consistent across both that classroom and what's happening in the home will only strengthen the kids' skills. So we're really, sort of to sum it up, taking this holistic approach with the sense that not only are we're talking about kids, we're always talking about kids, but you can't talk about kids in the absence of the adults that are leading those children and teaching those children. And you can't talk about, and although we talk about parents and we're including the parents and being 2-generational, we can't just hand a curriculum over to a teacher and expect them to be able to use that curriculum without really working to help support them in the use of that. And then that's going to let everything be much, much more successful. So I want to give you, because, you know, just to make sure that I keep my researcher credentials up here, give you the evidence that we've had some success with this program. And again, we've had now 4 studies of the program 3 of them were randomized clinical trials. 1 of them was a mixture of the randomized trial and quasi-experimental that was actually done by my colleague, Beth Green. And they've, as I said, ranged across populations of kids who are coming from less resourced environments or who have had, you know, particular challenges in their lives. And I'm not going to go deeply into these, but I will give Megan our annotated bibliography. There's a number of publications on the early work. But the sort of short answer to does this work is that across groups of these kids and across 3 randomized trials and a big scale up, we've found several things. One is that participating in kids leads kids to have better literacy before they start kindergarten. They also have better self-regulation. The parents are feeling like they do have better parenting, and there's better parent involvement in school. But what about educators? So to answer that question of what are we doing for the educators, is it sort of making a difference? Because we can think it's making a difference and never find that. I want to talk a little bit about the scale up that we've done of kits in Lane County. We were able to pair up with the United Way of Lane County to receive funding and several foundations, including the Ford Family Foundation sitting right here, and the Oregon Community Foundation, to be able to move the program out into 12 of the school districts that are there. So they have taken over the staffing. And in the course of that scale up, we have trained about 200 educators. And the nice thing about this is that we don't have any requirement that educators have to be K through 12 teachers or ECE teachers. We're doing the training. So, you know, provided they have some basic background in childhood, they can participate. So what school districts have done has been to, yes, include kindergarten teachers a lot of the time, but also to include their preschool promise teachers, some independent early childhood center teachers, Head Start teachers, as well as I said, elementary school teachers. So we're really kind of getting a broad range of different educators. And what we found is that we asked, from one summer to the next, we asked our teachers who were coming back. So had been trained in KITS one summer, gone off and taught whatever they do during the school year, their day job, during the school year, and then we're coming back. And just to give you an idea, about 71% of the teachers who had been trained in one summer actually came back for the second summer. And then we asked them, okay, what were you doing? Did you actually use KITS strategies during the school year? And we found that they did. In fact, 100% of them had used the KITS strategies in their normal classrooms. 90% of them had noted that at least one strategy was new to them. And I should say that this actually was true regardless of their years of experience teaching. So we had some people who'd been teaching for 20 years. We had some who'd been teaching for 1. That didn't matter in whether they were using these skills. 83% of them said that they thought that their students were better behaved because of it, and about 91 of them said that it was really helpful to have those skills in dealing with a certain student in their classroom. They also said that the things that they'd learned actually made it a better year for them. So by and large, 91% said, okay, being able to use these skills in my classroom, my typical classroom, made it better for me. And you can see here we divided it into the years of experience that teachers had. And again, it's not a huge factor in what they said. Just as, 10 plus years teachers said the same amounts. There are no differences between those amounts. And then the other thing that I think is important about thinking about embedding training into using a curriculum is that there's a diffusability factor in terms of if teachers learn skills and then go back into the classroom with these skills, they can also then teach their fellow teachers what they've learned. And we found that that was in fact the case, in that 95% of those teachers who'd learned KITS skills took them back to their colleagues during the school year, which was really nice to hear. So the other thing that I'm doing a dual thing here today, is to give you some hot off the presses research, because I said, okay, KITS works for early kindergarten, when kids enter kindergarten, they're looking better, and they are looking better at the end of kindergarten. But one of the things that we know happens, right, or we have heard happens with early childhood programs is this idea of fade out. Do they continue to actually show effects as kids go through school? Which I personally think is a really, really hard thing to ask early childhood programs to have like some huge effect across the school years. But we always have to check for them. And we do find that in first grade, kids who went through KIDS still have good academic and social skills that are higher than their peers. And that if you, that for our kids in foster care, their self-esteem and was increased in third grade, and they had a decreased likelihood of being involved with peers who are getting into trouble. We also find that reading fluency in third grade is still higher for the kids in KIDS. And I want to point out an important thing about that, to get back to my thought about social emotional skills at the beginning, is that yes, we do find that kids who were in KIDS, that leads to them having better reading fluency in third grade. But that effect goes through their self-regulation and their social emotional skills in kindergarten. So that we alter, if you alter those skills, that sort of underlying foundation, that seems to really continue to have effects forward into the later school years. And here's my hot off the presses. We just finished this. We were able to follow a group of children who had disabilities, developmental disabilities or delays, and were in early childhood special education who went through KIDS up through their 5th grade year. And so we were able to really look at, okay, could we have effects out that far? And in fact, again, and I had to put up, you know, one of these gnarly looking models to prove that I really am a researcher. But what we basically found was that KIDS, again, is affecting the social emotional skills early on. And then that is leading to, and this is kind of a silly thing at the end because it's the wrong way around, but it reduces poor self-regulation in 5th grade. But more importantly, in the sense of, you know, does it actually help with academics in the long run? It increases 5th grade academic skills and standardized testing. So we are beginning to see that we can really, the effects seem to push out into 5th grade. And hopefully next year I will be able to talk to you guys. Our first cohort of kids who are in foster care just should have graduated from high school this year, which dates me terribly. But so we've just gotten funding from the Meyer Memorial Trust to be able to follow those kids and find out if they graduated. So we've got about 191 kids who were in that study, and over the next 3 years, we'll be talking to them about whether they've graduated and what they intend to do. So with that, I'm gonna just say that, I think we all know, right, that if you can prepare children well, that they're gonna benefit. But I also think thinking about, you know, what's the scope of all these things that we're doing for kids in general in early childhood education, is that we're also preparing them to be successful and model that success for their peers. That when we really do engage our families in preparing children, they're sending well-prepared kids to school. We all know that, and that can also help support the schools, but that we also have to remember that the other piece of this puzzle is to have teachers who really do feel supported and prepared, because that's the way they're going to be able to use their knowledge and share that not only through the students, but also with their peers. So preparation is, of course, vital. And of course, I'm preaching to the choir on that. So thank you for listening to me today. That's our website if you'd like more information about the program in general. And I'm always happy to answer questions about the program, research, anything else. Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name is Katie, and I'm going to be continuing the continuum up into school-age kids and talking about care for after-school children. I'm going to be talking about our Access and Equity research project in after-school. But not quite. Well, the first slide is just going to give you a brief introduction to OregonASK, which is the statewide after-school network, in case you aren't familiar with us. Perfect. Thank you. Okay. Perfect. Thanks, Megan. Okay. So OregonASK is the statewide after-school network. Our mission is to support, expand, and educate on quality expanded learning across the whole state, where expanded learning means any kind of learning that happens outside of the traditional school day, whether that's before school, after school, on weekends, during school breaks, or during the summer. We have a couple of national affiliations. We are part of the 50-state after-school network, which supports efforts in every state to build system development and sustainability of quality after-school programs. So there's a network like us in every single state that's working on similar goals to support quality after-school, and are part of a larger nationwide movement around after-school. We are also the state affiliate to the National After-School Association, which is a national organization that supports professional development and advocacy for out-of-school time professionals. We coordinate with them to help build the capacity, knowledge, and competency of the expanded learning community. And as the statewide after-school network, we do a variety of types of work, but we like to sum it up with what we call our 3 Ps: policy, partnership, and professional development. I just wanted to give you a quick idea of the kind of work we do under each of those categories. Under partnership, we strive to connect people from around the state with each other, with after-school and summer programs, with other partners, to try and make sure that folks are working together and not reinventing the wheel in each corner of the state. Our policy work is centered around educating policymakers, organizations in the community for research, education, and other strategies around the importance of after-school and summer programs. We also try to push for policies that support after-school programs, professionals, and youth in Oregon. And finally, under professional development, we support high-quality expanded learning opportunities across the state by providing direct professional development training opportunities to hundreds of after-school professionals each year. Our biggest professional development event is our statewide Oregon After-School Conference, which is attended by hundreds of folks every year, and we also do dozens of other training opportunities throughout the year. All of our trainings, including every session at our conference, is aligned to the Oregon Registry, so we provide certificates for CKC credits to everyone, and through that, we really try to support the infrastructure for professional development for out-of-school time professionals. So it's a brief context to OregonASK, and I want to give you a brief context for the project that I'm here to talk about. So we have been working on what we call our Access and Equity and After-School Research Project. We had a little bit of grant funding from the Charles Stewart Mott Foundation to conduct this research. And our overall objective was really to collect comprehensive data on issues of access and equity related to outer-school programs in Oregon, particularly examining barriers to access and issues of equity, which is that first bullet point up there. This is really the first time that this kind of data has been collected in Oregon systematically for after-school programs. So this is really a first step in trying to understand more about the after-school landscape. And we want to look at where after-school programs are located, where after-school programs aren't located, who has access to programs, and who doesn't have access. And access can be impacted by a whole host of things, transportation and language being a couple of really simple examples of barriers to access. So a big part of our study was around what barriers to access there are for after-school programs. We also wanted to look at what's actually happening in after-school programs, not just who did them, but what are they doing when they're in those after-school programs? What are those experiences like? What are those kids learning and doing in their after-school programs? And our second objective was to take everything that we learned and raise awareness around after-school across the state for the general public, for policy and policymakers and legislators, as well as the general after-school community as a whole. And finally, to guide this project, we had a data design committee, which was composed of researchers, program providers, stakeholders, and government agencies from around the state that we brought together to really help us focus and guide this project as we embarked on collecting all of this data. So we convened them multiple times throughout the course of the project. They helped us refine our objectives. They reviewed our tools, helped us test them, and then helped us guide our implementation and outreach and data collection. So they were a huge part of our process and really integral to doing this study well. Okay, So this is a little bit about the tools and the audiences that we used for this project. We collected data in two primary ways. We had 3 surveys that we used. We had a management level survey that was directed at program managers, people who are operating after school or summer programs at the higher level, the management level. And that had a lot of information that was programmatic and logistical, like hours of operation, what kind of transportation do they provide, do they have scholarships, what are their fees like, a lot of that really practical information. We also had a survey for what we call frontline staff, which are the folks that are working with after-school providers, or working in after-school with youth, on a daily basis. So those are the people that are working with kids one-to-one on a regular basis. And finally, we had our student survey, which was directed to students in after-school programs. Our second mode of data collection was focus groups. We were talking to parents and families and to youth. We were talking both to parents and families and youth who participate in after-school programs and to families and youth who don't participate in after-school programs. Since a big focus of our work was around the barriers to participation in after-school, we wanted to make sure that we were really hitting the folks that aren't actually participating in after-school to make sure that we're getting some of that information about what barriers they are experiencing. And this chart has a little bit more information about each of those audiences and the focus for each of those tools. I'm going to be talking actually today primarily about the survey data. I'm going to be bringing in just a little bit from our focus groups at the very end, but I do want to mention that our focus group data is a huge part of this project. And my coworker, Juan Soto, is here today. He was my partner on this project, and he really took the lead on collecting the focus group information. He traveled all around the state and has been coding and analyzing mountains of transcripts. If you have questions on that, he's sitting right over there. Okay, and just a quick timeline for this. We've been working on this project for about 1 year and 3 quarters. We started out in the winter of 2018 with our data design committee reviewing objectives and then developing, testing, and finalizing our tools. We collected survey data starting in early summer of 2018 and collected all the way through June of 2019. Our focus group started in fall of 2018 and ended in early summer of 2019. Since we closed data collection, we have been cleaning and analyzing our data over the summer and working on our final report. We're planning on releasing our final report in January, so you all are getting a little bit of a sneak peek at our data today. We're still knee-deep in the analysis and the report writing process, so some of the numbers and charts I'll show you today aren't necessarily final, but we wanted to make sure we show you where we're at with this. And we're really excited to share some of the early results that we have. Okay. So on to some of the actual data. So I wanted to start out by showing you where we've collected responses from. So this chart up here is showing responses that we had on the management survey. So that's that first survey that I mentioned that's for the management level staff that's collecting a lot of logistical information. So we had 107 responses on that survey, and those are represented up here on this map. This is a map showing by zip code. So the bigger a dot means we have more responses in that zip code. Smaller dots are fewer responses. And because of the structure of after-school programs, program managers are often overseeing multiple sites. But we didn't want to make them take the survey multiple times for every single site. So there was an option on the survey to mark that your answers applied to multiple sites and then give us information about where those sites are located. So there's 107 responses, really represent about 475 after-school sites across the state. And so those lighter green circles are those additional sites represented by those answers on the management survey. And based on our current estimates of after-school programs around the state, we're estimating that we have responses from about half of the sites that we know of on this survey. These are responses on our staff survey. So we did our management survey of all of those sites, and then due to budget and time constraints, we did a smaller subsampling of staff. So this is results from some select after-school program sites. We had about 165 responses on our staff survey. This is again by zip code, so the bigger the circle, the more responses in that area that we had. These are results on our student survey, which is again a subsampling. We have just over 500 responses on our staff survey from after-school programs around the state. Again, bigger circles are more responses. And finally, these are our focus group locations. We visited 19 cities and communities around the state to conduct focus groups. In most of these areas, we did more than one focus group, because again, we are hitting both parents and families and youth, and those who participate in programs and those who don't. And we conducted focus groups in both English and Spanish. So if we put it all together, this is what the map looks like for all the different modes of data collection we had, and really shows sort of the representation from across the state that we have. Okay. So I wanted to share just a little bit of some of the actual results from the surveys. And this is just sort of a sneak peek, a little sample of the data we have. We'll have a lot more available in our final report. But this is some of the more basic information around what after-school programs are doing, who are their staff, and who are their students. So to start out, this is a question that shows the results on the management survey from what activities are offered in after-school programs. So you can see here that academic support, STEM, and creative arts, and general recreation are the most popular activities that are offered in after-school programs who participated in this survey. And this was just a check all that apply question, whether or not you offer this activity. We also asked, on average, what's the percentage of time that you spend on these activities? Not just do you do it, but how much do you do it? So we can see that academic support, on average, about 25% of program time is spent on academic support. You can also see that about 25% of time is spent on other activities not listed in this question. And this has some of those other activities listed that include things like cooking, leadership development, service learning, other types of enrichment activities. But when we're looking at the percentage of time spent on activities, I just wanted to note that after-school programs usually start about 2:30 or 3 whenever school gets out, and usually go to around 6. So they're working with anywhere from like 2.5 to 3 hours of time, sometimes up to 4, and about 25% of that time is spent on academic support. So that's a pretty good chunk of time. These are two charts of round attendance at programs. This first scatter plot shows youth served annually in after-school programs from the programs that responded to this survey. The median here is 200, and you can see that the quartiles are clustered pretty closely around that 200, with a few outliers of larger programs that are serving several thousand students. This chart below shows the average attendance by age group, and the biggest, darkest block here, it's pretty small, you probably can't see, but it's ages 6 through 12. So that is the bulk of the participation in after-school programs are from sort of that more elementary age group, followed by ages 13 to 15, or ages 13 to 16, excuse me, and then ages 17 and up. This is moving on to our staff survey. This map up here is the same as the orange map I showed you before. It's just the location of responses. And then the rest of this is some demographic information about the staff who completed this survey. We had just under half that were coordinators and managers, and these are not quite the management level, not the program managers, but more like site directors. So a coordinator who's managing a single site. And then just over half were not coordinators or managers. You see that about 3/4 of the staff participating in this survey are female, and then less male, and a small percentage, about 5% of folks that preferred not to identify their gender or preferred to self-describe. For ethnicity, the majority of folks, over 50%, were white or Caucasian. Second highest was Hispanic or Latino at just under 20%. And finally, education. For the survey, the most popular response was having a bachelor's degree or some college education. It's common to see college students working in after-school programs. So that was not surprising to us. This is a scatter plot of how many years were spent in the field by the folks who applied to this survey. We know that turnover is a huge issue, both in early childcare and in after-school. I know it comes up in the workforce study every year. And so we wanted to get a sense of how long the people taking this survey have been working in after-school. The median here is 2.75 years, with a few outliers, folks that have been in the field for their whole career. But what I think is also important to note here is how many dots show up on that 0 line on the left-hand side. There's a large portion of folks, this is their first year, maybe even their first month in an after-school program. We can also look at this by whether or not they're a site director or coordinator, or whether they're not. It's not very surprising to see that coordinators and site managers have been in the field a little bit longer, just over 3 years, whereas folks that aren't, their median is more like 2 years. We also asked them how many hours per week do they work in an after-school program. This top question is just asking total, how many hours do you work per week in an after-school program? And the median is about 20 hours. There's a lot of variation that ranges all the way from a few hours up to over 40. The second question asks how many hours per week do you spend working directly with youth? And this is, the median here is about the same. It's 19 hours. So I think it's interesting about this is that it's showing something that we know anecdotally, which is that staff have virtually no paid prep time. And they're spending most of their time working directly with students. This is a chart around the hours of professional development that folks have received in the past year. There's again a lot of variation. The median is 15 hours, which aligns with the number of hours required to be a licensed site. But there's again a lot of dots on the 0 line here. So folks that aren't getting any professional development at all. This is a chart around hours of professional development in the past year that folks have received by topic. The way we asked this question was, what topics have you received professional development in and how many hours have you received? And so the darker the square means that there are more replies in that particular category. Kind of hard to see on that chart overall what the most popular training topics are. So the chart next to it is a weighted rating based on more weighting for having more hours of that training. So we can look at it more overall, what the most popular training topics were. And you can see that they are social and emotional wellness, behavior management, diversity, equity, inclusion, and youth engagement were the most popular training topics for after-school professionals who took this survey. This question is around the curriculum and activities that the after-school instructors are using. This top question asks them how frequently they adapt their curriculum to meet the needs of the youth in their program. And these bottom 3 questions, I'll come back to the 2 in the middle, ask how often they give youth an opportunity to provide input on what they'd like to learn, and how often they make adaptations or develop their own curriculum. And you can see this was a Likert scale, a strongly disagree to a strongly agree. There's a lot of agreement on that top question and the bottom 3 questions. And there's a lot of the dark blue and the blue, which is the strongly and moderately agree. But the 2 questions in the middle, there's less agreement. Those questions asked how well instructors feel that their curriculum and that their program structure and environment reflect the cultures of youth in their program. And if you look at those 2 questions a little bit more in depth, we can break it down by folks who received more than the median amount of PD, folks that received more than that 15 hours, and folks that received less than the median hours of professional development. What we see here is virtually no difference. And if you remember from the last slide, diversity, equity, inclusion was one of the most popular training topics that people on this survey cited. So what that suggests to us is that those trainings are not covering cultural responsiveness in relation to program structure or in relation to curriculum and activities, which does suggest a potential professional development need for the after-school field. This question is around cultural interactions, and this was again a staff question for frontline staff. The top 3 questions ask them how comfortable they are, or I'm sorry, the top 3 ask how frequently they interact with people from other cultures. The top one is students, the middle one is staff, and the third one is, it's frequently staff and youth. So families, they interact with the least, families of different cultures. The bottom 3 questions ask how comfortable they are in interactions with staff, with families, youth, and staff from other cultures. So in those bottom 3 questions, there's a lot of comfort. People are strongly agreeing with that statement, but on the actual frequency that they interact with those folks, it's a little bit less. And when we remember this question, we're going to come back to it at the end. We'll skip over it just for now. The student demographics, I'm going to go through this a little bit quickly, because I was a bit ambitious about how many slides I could get through, so bear with me. We had primarily middle school students take this survey. That was mostly a reading level issue. As you saw previously, it's that elementary school that are really the bulk, but we did this survey just with 4th and 5th graders at the elementary level. And then the middle school comprised larger sample. Students' gender, we had a little bit more female than male. For student ethnicity, you can tell from our data that we made an intentional effort to reach out to traditionally underserved communities. This student ethnicity data doesn't reflect the state of Oregon as a whole. We had about 25% that were Black or African American, and about 20% that were Hispanic or Latino or white or Caucasian. I think it's also important to note that about 20% preferred not to answer of students. 20% of students didn't want to specify their ethnicity. We also asked students what their preferred language was, whether it was English or whether it wasn't English. This question asks students how much they feel like they belong in their after-school program, how much they look forward to coming, and how safe they feel. Overall, there's pretty high agreement. We have a lot of agrees and a lot of strongly agrees. But if we look at this question by gender, this is a trend that we've seen over the past couple of years with other student surveys that we've done. The students that preferred not to specify a gender or preferred to self-describe overall are agreeing less that they belong here and are saying that they feel less safe. So we're seeing that consistently with programs that we've done student surveys with over the last few years. We don't know exactly what it means yet, but it's definitely an area for further investigation with after-school programs. In the interest of time, I'm going to skip this one because I want to get to some of the ones at the end. And go on this question. So this slide shows sort of one of my favorite parts about this study, which is that we have a question here around communication from our management survey, from our staff survey, and from our student survey. The purple question asks what languages communication materials are offered in. Most programs offer in English, and a high percentage also offer in Spanish. The staff question asks what languages they're comfortable using and what languages they actually use. Again, English is really high, but we see a smaller percentage of folks using Spanish and virtually none using any other language. And this bottom question asks students how easily they are understood by staff when they use their preferred language. And we can break it down by students who prefer English and students who don't prefer English. And we see that those are very similar. So it suggests that for students, the communication strategies that staff are using in the program work well. And I wanted to show you these questions, not because they're directly comparable to each other. They're apples and oranges and bananas, but because I wanted to show you that one of the most exciting pieces for me about this research is that we can look at one issue from multiple perspectives. We have the management level perspective, staff, and the students. And if we keep going and look at our focus group information, we can add in the family perspective. In our focus groups, one of the biggest topics of conversation that we had with folks was around what barriers to participation they experienced. Cost was the one that they cited the most. Second behind that were cultural barriers. And up here are the quotes that we have, several quotes that illustrate what we mean by cultural barriers. And in essence, we just mean barriers that are experienced as a result of not being part of the dominant culture. I'm almost out of time, so I'm not going to give you too much time to read this, but I'm happy to share these slides with you after. But these quotes illustrate barriers to communication from the parent and family perspective. And if you think back to this slide, where we show that after-school staff are saying that they're quite comfortable in their interactions with people from other cultures, that doesn't necessarily line up with the information from our focus groups, and that a lot of families are, in fact, experiencing cultural barriers. And it reinforces, again, that need for more training around that topic, even though diversity, equity, inclusion was one of the most common training topics for folks who took this survey. I'll skip that. And finally, this is my last slide. We're gonna, on this project, as I said, we're still working on it, but we're gonna work next on some mapping of after-school programs. We're gonna start geographically plotting where programs are with information about them. Provide transportation, do they not? Can we start seeing geographically where there's not access? Our final report will be released in January, and we're also going to be developing tools and resources to support after-school programs that are informed by the data that we've collected through this project. So, thank you.
Am I supposed to say cake time is canceled and I get all the cake?
So there will be no breaks. No. I think we can do 10 minutes, and so we'll bump the schedule back a little bit. Then we'll do cake and toast and then come back. So, because I do want to be able to discuss all of your wonderful work. So.
minutes of questions, yes. I'm just on cake. So, yeah. Okay. Anyone have questions for our very great panel?
To all of the presenters. I have a couple questions, but I think my first one is for Katie, and I know that we just got a snapshot of what you did. I'm curious if children with disabilities were included in the sample of kids that you were talking to.
Yeah, that's a great question. We did include, especially parents and families. We did a couple focus groups that were specifically in communities with parents and families with disabilities.
And in another hat, I mentioned earlier, I'm an associate professor of kinesiology, and most of my work is in adaptive physical activity, so I'm very interested in the after-school portion of that. One resource and I'm happy to send this to you, but there actually is a guidance document from the Office of Civil Rights specifically for sport participation for kids with disabilities that might be a great resource as you're putting that together.
We'd love to see that. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? If you want to ask your question individually after, I think you could do that now, but could we have one more round of applause for all the
Y'all want your cake break. I get it. So as has been alluded to, we will be posting materials from today, slides as available, but also I know people have mentioned reports and different things, and so those will be circulated. We all have your emails. So we are going to try to stay on task. I know on track with time. Thank you all for dealing with my little signs. So in order to do that, please take care of yourself, of course. But we have cake and some apple cider because this is our 25th anniversary of this event, which is amazing. I feel like, I'm amazed that I get to be here and be a part of the 25th event. But for the sake of time, if you could pick up, it was like lunch, pick up cake, pick up some your cider for your toast, and come back to the room in an orderly fashion, and we'll get started. And then, do not leave in for 2 minutes. But when you come back, David, thank you. We'll talk about where things are going with, Oh, okay. Oh, great. We'll give kind of an update on where things are in terms of the Raise Up Oregon plan, and have some opportunity for a broader discussion. Okay, I have now gotten the update that there is enough cider out there to get started.
Can I just say one thing?
Yes, absolutely.
I just wanted to make sure I think I kind of said it at the end, but the 6 stories, maybe today, that was our goal, but I haven't checked, are going to be up on our website, and so it's a fairly easy address, but I'll get it to Megan or something. So we just wanted to make sure you could watch the stories, you could share the stories. The idea was that we got the stories out there so people could hear the information. So I'll get that specific information to Megan.
Great, thank you. Okay, I think we can break. Go. Cider. We could pretend it's champagne. So I do want to acknowledge that this is the 25th anniversary, and that the state of Oregon that the state of Oregon has come a long ways. I know I've been in this position 1 year. I feel like I'm a baby when it comes to figuring out the childcare world, let alone Oregon's childcare world specifically. We know that it's a messy path. And so please, if you haven't, check out the poster, and you all have of the timeline, and you all have your own little personal timeline. So to remind yourself, I know I'm going to post it in my office to remind myself of where we've come. And so I'd like to toast to 25 years and hopefully 25 more. Cheers. Yeah. Career of work. And also, like, there are some of you I know who have been a part of this. I did look at our poster. I didn't see anyone at 25 years. If Bobby had been here, I feel like I just broke her streak. So by just having it today, while she is in the San Juan Islands, so she's doing all right. And she's very much here. So yes, to Bobby, for sure. And I don't know if anyone else feels like they want to say anything. It's been here a while.
I'll just say from a national perspective, Megan and I and others spend a lot of time at national conferences. There's a Child Care and Early Education Policy Research Consortium funded by OPRE that we go to every year. And this is by far the topic that we talk about in Oregon, that people lean in and are like, well, you do what? And as far as we know, I think, and I don't know if they even still do it, I think Massachusetts is the only other state that has something even remotely like this. And so just as a researcher, like to know that people are here that listen, and that we are in Oregon, I think I've worked in a lot of states, like have a landscape in which we share, and everybody's opinions and voices are valued. It makes me feel very fortunate and very happy. And I think we're also the envy of many other states. So thank you.
Pam.
So I have to ditto that, because when I also go out to the National Registry Alliance Conference and we spend time with other states and other registries, we always talk about this group when we take our workforce report, and other states are copying it, and we've had other connections. So Oregon is the bomb, right? But I have to share, right? Yeah. I have to share though, one of my first times here, when I first took this job in 2008, I started coming into the Researcher Roundtable. But at that same time, we were starting to talk about Oro. And there was one of our colleagues actually at the Early Learning Division called it HAL. And then HAL 2. And then it actually was called a warehouse, and it was called TED for a while. Training, education, database, sexy. But it kind of clicked with Chris, which was the Office of Child Care Database, and we knew they were going to be good friends. So, but it was in an early child care researcher roundtable meeting where we came and we were talking about this great database we were building and all the magical things it was going to do for the state of Oregon. And we were thinking, we were calling it TED. And everybody at the Researcher Roundtable said, well, isn't that what the Oregon Registry does? And so it was you all that convinced us to name it Oro instead. So that's the history of Oro.
So I want to just share that having come to this meeting several years ago,
The group from Deschutes put out their resource book, that data book that they had developed. And we as a group, and I'm from Lynn, Benton, and Lincoln counties, were so excited about what they did. We said, we can do that. And we did it in our own way, but we just, and you can see on, and we put these little things on your, not that thing, this thing on your table. We spent a really significant amount of time looking at our data in our region and brought together a really broad range of group of people. We do have a couple copies of it, but it is online. But this is our deep dive into the data, but it really came out of this meeting. So I just want to say that having been here, it did make an impact. The things that we share, the way that we talk with each other does make an impact. And we are sharing this across our region. It's how our early learning hub board members are making decisions about crucial investments. And so again, I think it's just really important to know that it's not just about sitting here. When we leave here, we actually do things. So yay.
Well, shall we think forward now? So to wrap up the day, I've invited David to share a little bit of an update on the Raise Up Oregon plan and Early Learning Council and where things are going, and then do some thinking ahead, thinking forward.
Thank you. And I have to say, I know everyone's held this up, but I really love this. I also kind of like that it sort of reminds me of like Candyland. And so I'm sort of trying to figure out exactly what the board game that goes along with this, but I think I know we'll return to that at the end. So I thought we'd just give a little bit of a, well, to return to, and I also have to admit, I'm like 48 hours after being away on vacation for a couple of weeks. So I'm physically here, but still mentally returning to work. I think one of the things that is on here is also in 2018, we had the chance to, as a state, put together a new strategic plan for the next 5 years, Raise Up Oregon. And I think that one of the things that was really quite intentional in the development of Raise Up Oregon was to have a vision for supporting children and families in Oregon to thrive that really acknowledge that it's going to take everyone, that it's going to also take all of the different sectors working together, that that means not just early care and education, but also health, human services, building those connections to K through 12. And I think one of the things that the council also heard throughout their engagement was also how important housing is and the challenges around housing are for young families across the state. So and I think the other thing that's really important about Raise Up Oregon is to really think about this as a sort of a shared document for everyone across the state, as a tool to sort of think about how we work together to bring about those outcomes that we really want to see for children and families. However, I'm going to talk a little bit about from what's happening on the state side to also really make sure that this isn't just something that sits on the shelf, but really make sure that there's a commitment across partners to really make this a living document and to make sure that the strategies and objectives identified in the plan really happen. So I think couple things that are going on, just as a little bit of a background. Part of what also happened during last legislative session was a bill to sort of reconstitute the Early Learning Council, and the council will go back to a size of 9, with all of the sort of with state agency heads also continuing to participate in the council. But part of what that means is the governor's office over the last couple of months has been in the process of trying to recruit new council members, and with really the goal of making sure that the council also is reflective of the diversity of the state, the geography of the state, and also make sure that there's leaders who can also speak from the perspective of the health sector, the connections to our K through 12, and to really make sure that the council also has that sort of strong cross-sector representation that I think has really been core to the vision that's been laid out in Raise Up Oregon. Part of what's also happening, we've been trying to do over the last couple months in preparation for the council coming back together, and they'll have their first retreat at the end of this month, and really start to dig into what are the priorities for the next year or two. But also has been to continue the engagement, I think, that was happening with all of the state agencies in the development of Raise Up Oregon, and make sure that also continues as part of the sort of implementation of the plan. So part of what the council's also done is sort of brought together an agency implementation team that has representations from the Early Learning Division, but also both from child welfare and self-sufficiency side of human services, from health, from public health, from the CCOs, from housing, and also our K through 12 partners. And that group has only had a chance to meet twice, but it's been really, I think, already exciting, a chance to sort of identify where some of that key shared work is. And part of what we've asked that group to do is took all of the strategies and action items from the plan, and what are the things that came out of the legislative session that move this work forward, and what are also the things that you as an agency are really working on, focused on the next year, that are really closely tied to those action items. And we're sort of using those as a tool both to keep track of what's happening with Raise Up Oregon implementation. We're going to have a chance to finalize that document and take that to the Governor's Children's Cabinet in the end of October. A little chance for the Governor to see that, all the agency heads to see that. So I think it's also an opportunity to reaffirm that continued commitment to that work. But I think one of the other things it's also allowing us to help identify is, you know, for a lot of these action items that are in here, there's multiple agencies, not only to see the number of action items across the plan where agencies are really already committed to working towards those goals, but it's also really interesting to see how many of them, there's sort of multiple agencies, and this is really help us identify those areas where there's sort of additional need for coordination and support. So I think just want to give you a little bit of flavor of some of the work that's just starting right now to really help make sure that this stays a living document, and that we maintain that sort of cross-sector commitment to really making the plan a reality. But I think, you know, one of the things I also sort of, as I was thinking about the beautiful Candyland chart, and, you know, thinking about where we've gone in the last 25 years, and it felt like one of the sort of questions that I think is really exciting when you look at this chart is, we know that this gets to bend back around, and we're going to see 2020, 21, 2021, 2022. And so I think one of the questions I just wanted to sort of throw back to this room is also sort of thinking about the conversations that you all had today, both this morning and this afternoon. What do you want to see written under 2020? What do you want to see written under 2021, 2022? I think one of the things that this also reveals is there's so much history here, and it took all of you in this room. You know, we're all key contributors to so many of these things, and I think we have this opportunity to also think about, given the research and discussions we had today, what are some of those things that you would, if you were to come back and see this start in a couple of years, what would you like to see written under those things? That was an open question for all of you.
So right now, Baby Promise is federally funded, and I would like to see it state funded and rolled out across all counties. God didn't pay me to say that, but you owe me. I think for me, it would be some clear, collaborative data systems that work together, and we have information that can really drive the work, that it's easy to find in one place, kind of thing. But yeah.
We agree.
I would like to see college level professional development opportunities available in languages more than just English, so that we really can provide the kind of professional and durable skills that our kids deserve, our families deserve, and our providers deserve.
With lived experience and professional experience included as credit.
Since we're just talking about 2020, I feel, building on a previous conversation, I'd love to see a new table set for higher education conversations and articulation agreements between universities, community colleges, and bringing some new players into that conversation that typically don't show up to things like the articulations, such as deans and people in ODE who are kind of holding some of the levers to articulation.
I love thinking about visionary pieces. So I would say two things: equitable access for all families of all children. And secondly, which also came up earlier from Kathleen, would be compensation for workers. I should say better compensation.
Somebody had brought up data, and I'm wondering, do you have any idea what's happening with the longitudinal data system, SLDS? Because that would bring together a lot of the data that we're talking about.
Coordinating commission. And so I think that's a good thing. It was received some more funding in the legislative session. The plan has always been to build in early learning data, I would say, from the early learning division side. The problem is we don't have a system that collects that data to then put the data into the SLDS. So that is something we are hoping with the new federal preschool development grant application that we would put resources for our own data system.
Ingrid, I'd like to see some time and energy supporting early childhood educators, building of resiliency in themselves, because it's only resilient early childhood educators who are able to scaffold that social emotional development for young children.
I'm going to channel Shauna Tomini a little bit too, and sort of just to think about a lot of the partnerships that can exist with the parenting education hubs, the early learning hubs, and the CCR&Rs, and even the coordinated care COCs, CCOs, that we could do a better job at elevating those and putting those those persons at the table. I think we could do that. I think that's a good goal for the next year even, is just to make sure that across Oregon, I know some areas do it really well and some don't, but we think about family teacher partnership, we think about parent voice, the sort of parenting hubs and those classes that are run by OPEC and such might be a nice way to leverage existing systems.
Mine's a little bit more abstract, but in the way of how we think about changing these systems, I would like to see more of a holistic approach in that it's a collaboration with folks like you, state agencies, but also parents, teachers, and providers working together to make those changes, and for lots of those folks to be involved. And obviously I'm speaking from a grassroots perspective, right? Because I'm an organizer. And I would love for the dialogue to change around it being more of an individual problem with individual parents or teachers or providers to more of a systemic problem, which I think is the reason that we have trouble with retention. So I would like to see that dialogue change more in order to advocate for things like Senator Patty Murray's Child Care for Working Families Act, which would cap the tuition at 7% of a family's income per federal guidelines. So if we change the perspective, we can create broad base of support and value for policies like that.
I'll do a little channeling of Bobby, just in terms of remembering and reflecting on the day. I'm just thinking about this morning, talking about refugee and immigrant families and students, and how our institutions need to adjust as well, and thinking about our child care patchwork of a system, and remembering and being in Oregon and having a very strong home-based child care system. Although it feels like it can feel like not that great of news. We know that small-based child care is, as it is across the United States, steadily declining in terms of who's coming in and doing that work. It's important to remember that the small-based care and the family, friends, and neighbors are providing the bulk of care, especially for some of our most vulnerable populations, some of our youngest populations. And so for me, I think it's a strength of Oregon that we have the history of thinking about home-based care. I mean, even before Bobby, it was with Art Emlyn. And so for me, that's, I know that's always going to be in the back of my mind in thinking about what the questions are and how we strengthen this system, is to remember that that family, friends, and neighbors, it's really adults caring for children and raising communities. And so kind of helping cross those bounds. So any other thoughts? This was great. I really loved hearing where everyone wants things to go. Thank you, David. That was a great question for leading a discussion. I love it. I think we can, let's wrap up. Thank you all for a lovely day. I really, really appreciate you all making it out here, making the drives from wherever you are. Thank you to Oregon for having lovely weather today. I really appreciate that. And we will be, like I said, we'll post information soon. We're also, as we are researchers, we'll be sending out an evaluation. We changed things up this time. We want to know what worked for you, what didn't work, ideas for the future. We'll also be asking around ways to continue these conversations throughout the year. So there are a core group of folks who I see many of in the room today that join every other month call around planning this event. And so I'd like to open up an invitation if anyone else is interested in joining those calls. We would love it. But also if there are things that you wanted to hear more about, or things that you're like, ooh, maybe this would be a good thing to bounce off this group, let me know, because we're always looking for new ways to keep things interesting. And if there's a way to bring some of this energy and conversation throughout the year, we'd love to do it. So thank you all so much. And I think that's a wrap. So thank you.
this back in here.